Hello, my name is Pablo Smithson. I'm a brand journalist at Vertical Leap. I'm going to talk to you today about the role of content marketing in the buying cycle, which I guess boils down to the way people are using online information to support decision making when it comes to their purchases, and further to that, how there is different types of information that they're using at different stages of that buying cycle. So there's not going to be one piece of content that's going to be appropriate for all types of consumer out there. But let me start off by talking a bit about myself. I'm a trained journalist. I was trained to work on newspapers, but have since moved on to online. And I guess there's a real overlap between what I was trained to do as a newspaper journalist and what we do in the news content team, and pretty much for content marketing as a whole. And that's the push for quality. This is particularly in the news. It's by creating quality articles, interesting articles. You're making the publisher an authority, and with the value that you're giving the people reading your content, you're creating greater trust. In newspapers, that's useful because you want to build a long-term relationship with them. In marketing, it's more sales orientated, of course, but it's just as important. And so with content marketing itself, we've got to accept that the online phase has become hugely important in recent years. I mean, it's what people do now. They look for information on the internet before they make a purchase, and Google in fact came out with an ebook called ZMOT, or Zero Moment of Truth, recently, that really explained it all. So what it essentially said in 70 plus pages is that people are spending much more time researching a product, researching an industry, before they actually get to the shelf. So they're looking at all sorts of different information on the line. So whether that's customer testimonials, reviews, product comparisons, just general news on that industry. They're looking at several pieces of information before they actually go to the shelf, whether that's the online shelf or the physical shelf, to make that purchase. And what Google have said is that there's this zero moment of truth between the stimulus and the shelf. The first moment of truth being at the shelf, whether you make the purchase, which purchase you make, and the second moment of truth having been the experience once you've actually bought it. Do you enjoy that product? Is it useful to you? And so this new zero moment of truth is between the stimulus and the shelf. And the example, just to illustrate it, that was given in the ZMOT ebook was about if you see an advert for a gig, perhaps, you wouldn't sort of immediately you probably wouldn't immediately just look at the gig and say, okay, right, it's happening at such and such venue at such and such time. Well, I'll go down there. The first thing you do if you saw that a band was playing at a venue near you would be to Google probably that band or perhaps that venue, see if the band had done anything recently. There's this whole so much content that you probably go through before you actually decide, well, maybe I will go down to that gig. So what this tells us is that there's a lot of information that consumers are consuming, or that consumers are reading before they get to the shelf. And as a marketer, you should be wanting to be involved in that. You should be wanting to be building your relationship with them earlier on in the process, so that later on in the buying cycle you're in a much better position. There's several different buying cycle definitions available on the internet, but this is one that I quite like, in the fact that it starts off with absolutely everyone, or perhaps you could call them a suspect, moving down to anyone or a prospect, then a right person, a lead, and then finally to a ready person, which we might call an opportunity. And so what I want to do over the next couple of minutes is look at each of these categories and talk a bit about what sort of content works with these people. What sort of content would they respond to if they were at that stage of the buying cycle? And obviously focusing on how this fits in with content marketing. To illustrate this a bit better, I thought I'd bring in an analogy. My one's going to be the DIY shop. I think this one works. I think it's a sort of thing that people do search online. They consume a lot of information about DIY before they make their purchases. So let's use that as our analogy. When it comes to the first stage, everyone, this is our suspect. This is for people who aren't even in your DIY shop. So they've not even shown an interest in your products. So what you're trying to do is entertain them rather than persuade. You want to use your creativity to put together interesting content that doesn't require in-depth knowledge or anything like that. If you make it too complex or sales, so the person is going to ignore it. They're going to walk straight past your shop because it's too complicated for them. It's not appropriate for their level of the buying cycle. And so what sort of content should you be firing at them? Well, news content works because it can be interesting for anyone. Viral videos are really popular. Infographics and general social sharing is the sort of thing that can work for everyone, for a suspect. My example isn't actually DIY related, but it's fun nonetheless. So this is a video advert for Pedigree. I mean, I don't own a dog, so I'm not their target market. I'm very much at the beginning of their buying cycle because I don't actually have any need for dog treats. But yeah, I remembered that advert, and I think it really works and it reminds you of the brand itself. It makes you laugh as a cute dog. It really works as a nice bit of content marketing for absolutely everyone in the buying cycle. So when we move down to the next stage, this is anyone or our prospect. And this is sort of someone who's figuratively raised their hand in a physical sense. It's perhaps if someone's entered your shop, they've not picked out anything they want yet, but you'd never take them straight to a checkout. If somebody just walks straight into your shop, you let them walk around. You basically want to nurture this person to go from a consumer to a customer. What you want to do, show how much of a professional company you are, show the greater knowledge that you have. And so for that reason, the sort of content you could be firing at them and that they could respond very well to would be something like news content again, deeper analysis, perhaps an evergreen piece. That's an extended piece of writing about the sector. An e-newsletter is a good example, mainly because they would have, by signing up for an email newsletter, they've sort of figuratively raised their hand, so it really fits in with this category. And perhaps a webinar to show them something more about your industry. My example here is a DIY one. It's from B&Q. I think do this really well. So this is a guide to how to paint doors and windows, and there's no, in this initial page you can see no initial suggestion that they're trying to sell you anything. All they're doing is giving you information about how to use this, all the paint and products and everything like that. There's these different types of panels and glass doors and flush doors. So all it's doing is giving you good information about how to paint. If you go to that tools and materials tab, it will show you products that you can buy at B&Q. But it's it's done in a subtle way so that you're not scared off by any sort of salesy talk. It's just providing you information that you might need at that stage of the buying cycle. So we move on to the third stage, which is the right person or the lead. This is someone who, if they were in your DIY shop, might have stopped at an aisle, looked at a product, and so you can see that they are interested. They've got a need, you might say. So this is a real sales possibility. And because it's a real sales possibility rather than just someone vaguely interested, you can start to tell them more about the product, more about the service, make it slightly more salesy. You want to engage with them and continue to show them that you're an authority as a retailer or as a service provider. So the sort of thing that would work here are white papers, case studies, product comparisons. Remember, this is someone who could very well be buying something soon, so things like product comparisons work brilliantly. Again, we'd want news content to keep that authority going. Something like a demo video or a customer testimonial as well is perfect because, as I say, this is someone who may well be buying the product in the future, and so they're serious about wanting to know more information, very specific information as well. So in terms of this deeper content, a great example is by where it's brought to you by HSBC, as you can see in the top right, but it's a website called Business Without Borders, which has a huge amount of information about international business transactions and the sector itself and profiles of companies and all sorts of stuff. And they've done it brilliantly. I mean, they've put a lot of resources into this, and it seems like they've put a lot of resources into this, and it really works. There's so much to read about here, and it really works for anyone who has a company and is working, who really wants to get involved in international business. I'm sure this is a wonderful resource. So what they're doing is they're providing all that people want for that stage of the buying cycle when they might be just on the cusp of getting involved in the international businesses. And of course, HSBC provide international business services, so that they've positioned themselves beautifully to take that sale when it does actually happen. And so moving on to the final stage, which is the ready person. So, and some people call this an opportunity. So this is for someone, if they're in your DIY shop, they've got the tool in their hand, they're walking through the shop towards the checkout. So they've not bought it yet, but you can see that they've got a need, you can see they've got an intention to buy. So at this stage, sales information is appropriate, of course. You're not going to scare anyone off by telling them product specifics if they've already got the thing in their hand and they're waiting to pay, basically. So it's all about keeping their trust and giving them more specific information, more details about the product that they've got their eyes on. So what sort of content do we want to give them? News content to keep that authority, but product information, just general sales talk and return on investment information is brilliant for here, because it just keeps persuading them just ahead of them making the checkout. Another example here from B&Q. This is a sort of a kind of a product comparison between different hammers you can buy. It's pretty explicit that they're going to sell these hammers, because as soon as you click on them, it takes you through to the checkout. But that's absolutely fine, because if you've searched for advice on choosing the right hammer, you're probably pretty close to actually buying one yourself. So this sort of content is completely appropriate for this stage of the buying cycle. And so once we've gone through those 4 stages, what you've built yourself without really realizing is a content strategy in many senses, because you know what sort of content you want to fire at people from the very beginning of when they first make contact with the company to when they're just about to make a purchase. This graph might feel a bit imprecise, a bit vague, but the fact is it's not an exact science. So sometimes a product comparison may be a lot more appropriate for one stage than a case study. In other areas, perhaps a viral video wouldn't work for an industry. So it's very much a loose science. I mean, it's interesting, when I was putting together this presentation, actually, I thought a lot about what the buying cycle means and how it works when it comes to content marketing. And it was only towards the end that I realised that I too had been going down a buying cycle for a product. I'd realised that I decided I wanted to whittle, and so I started looking up whittling information, and I could see myself. Well, in retrospect, I could see myself ticking off all of these different types of content as I went towards buying these 2 little whittling knives, and it's just interesting. I'm sure all of you listeners who think back to any purchases you've made in the recent months or in recent years, you could probably tick off quite a few yourself, and you could probably see how you've used this online information to help you make a decision. And I mean, just the fact that it applies to so many different purchases, it just makes you think that if you as a company are not marketing to people in this way, then you're just missing an opportunity, because people do use online content to make their purchase decisions. Consciously or subconsciously, they are using this information to help them make educated decisions about what they're going to buy. So just a couple of takeaway points. Going back to what I said about the newspapers and content marketing in general, the more value you give, the more trust you gain. Your online face has changed and has become even more important in the modern marketing world. Different content is relevant for each stage of the buying cycle. It's not just one piece of content that you're firing at everyone in the buying cycle. There's different pieces that are appropriate at different times. As I said before, you've got to work out what your customers are going to respond to each stage. And finally, just to reiterate how important it is how content supports that purchase decision-making process. Thank you very much. If you want to get in touch with us, there's all of our details on there for various social media and other address details. Thanks a lot. Cheers.